Welcome to Powering the Future Within, the podcast where we explore the breakthroughs shaping the future of MedTech. I'm Omari Bouknight, CEO of Resonant Link Medical. Each episode, we speak with a leader who is driving the next wave of medical innovation, advancing technologies that are smarter, less invasive, and more connected than ever before. This is where the future of health takes shape. Let's dive in. Today's guest is Marwan Berrada. Marwan is the founder and managing director of T45 Labs. T45 Labs is a medtech innovation and venture studio focused on accelerating the development and commercialization of breakthrough medical technologies. The firm partners with founders, investors, and healthcare innovators to move ideas from concept to clinical and commercial reality. Marwan has built his career at the intersection of vision and disciplined execution, and I'm excited to have him on the show. Marwan, welcome to Powering the Future Within.
Thank you. Thank you, Omari, for having me.
Yeah, very excited to have you on. So your story is very interesting. You went from Morocco to Minnesota. How did that journey unfold, and what shaped you?
Well, first of all, I want to say thanks for having me. I think the invitation from hearing your podcast and being part of it is an honor. Thank you. Thank you also for pointing out my journey. Morocco to Minnesota first uh, was driven by my love, passion towards biomedical engineering. Came in through uh, the US at the age of 18, so very early. Did not speak English very well at that time. My schooling was all in French. So I had to learn the great language before actually attending school. Why Minnesota at that time? Minnesota, and it still is the capital of MedTech for us here in our industry. So our ability to be part of that ecosystem is very important. So I decided at that time to move to Minneapolis, attend University of Minnesota, and start with my engineering degree in mechanical engineering. Always wanted to invent, and happy that I've been able to do that. So.
And you must have had to have a pretty significant wardrobe change too, I can imagine.
I can tell you a lot of stories about how came in with literally very summery dress wear, and I had to face the brave cold in Minneapolis. I learned I have good friends who took care of me, so I'm appreciative. They taught me how to be a Nordic coming from Morocco, so we're excited about that.
And as you mentioned, you trained as a mechanical engineer. Did you always see yourself applying engineering to medicine, or did that evolve over time? And if you did see yourself applying engineering to medicine early on, where did that come from?
That intersection of medicine and engineering came actually when I was a kid. My family had my aunt had a surgery, a brain surgery. So she had a drainage that needs or valve that needs to be implanted for her hydrocephalus. And I was amazed how a surgeon was able to talk, first of all, not devices, just fluid mechanics. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. Somebody who is really doing brain surgery able to tell you fluid. I was like, well, how did you get there? And they said, hey, look, we partner up with engineers to build devices. And by the way, those devices are not perfect. So we still need to do a lot more. And that was around 16, 17 years old. And that's how I really get hooked. Since day one, coming from Morocco to the US, my aim was always towards inventing biomedical engineering. So when I came here, the engineering portion of it was important to me. The clinical portion of it, I had to learn along the way. And throughout my career, I developed that. And that's what makes me actually at this stage really being able to straddle multiple uh, industries or multiple topics from engineering to clinical, and now obviously entrepreneurship and the rest.
Right, right. And we'll get to T45 Labs, which is doing some very exciting, working on some very exciting innovations. But it was quite the journey to get there. You're in Minnesota, you're studying mechanical engineering at some advanced levels. You know, you want to apply it to the medical field. What was your path then from education and academia, then on to finally to T45? What was in the in between?
Right. Working for companies that are local to obviously Minneapolis, taking on projects. It was always cardiovascular. So obviously we have companies in Minneapolis like Boston Scientific, EV3 at the time was acquired by Covidien, then Medtronic. Then my path actually has moved from Minneapolis to Montreal, where I work for another medical device company called CryoCath, developing a pulmonary vein isolation device. Always attracted by the technology of things, but within the clinical setting. So most of the early devices and engineering that I have done was always breakthrough engineering. So what's next? That was really the question that I had to answer all the time. And that gets you into having an experience to really ask questions and observe. And that's what led me from this transition of engineering or from engineering to really product development. And we can talk about the difference of the two, and then towards obviously management and what we're doing today at T45.
Right, right. So then for those who are unfamiliar, how would you characterize what T45 Labs is and what's behind the name?
So, my career was unfortunate to be part of a great hospital called the Cleveland Clinic. I was part of the management team around the innovation for the Heart and Vascular Institute, and that's a fantastic institution there. Learned quite a bit. If you work with physicians, they're very busy people, right? So at some point, you need to get their focus. I think all of us are probably ADHD, so we have to get them somewhere where we can have a conversation, right? So if you've ever been into the Cleveland Clinic on campus, there's a really nice hotel. And in that hotel, there's a nice restaurant called Table 45. So every time we wanted to have conversations with physicians, get them out of their environment, we say, hey, meet me at T45. And when I set out to really think about, what's, this innovation, moving the field forward, what's next question, in full honesty, I had to come up with a name on what I want to do. So I called it T45 Labs, thinking that down the road somebody would be smart enough to tell me, "Hey, Marwan, you should be, naming this a little bit differently." But the story behind it is fantastic because it points out towards innovation, cardiovascular. It really summarizes very well what we do here at T45, and probably we'll get into it later.
Yeah, I'm picturing a lot of napkin drawings around the table there at the table 45.
Very true. Very, very true. 120%.
And those conversations that you were having with the clinicians, physicians, were you primarily focused on what they were expressing were their needs, or were there already some ideas around technologies that were there, or how are you discovering some of these innovations?
Right. And actually, there was two approaches. Of course, physicians get frustrated. They don't have what they need sometimes, or they wish they would have something, given a certain case, patient anatomy and stuff like that. So although they operate, their brain is very active. So they come up also and say, "I wish I can do this and that." Well, I think what's missing a little bit on the innovation side there is bringing that idea all the way to commercialization, whether it's viable to commercialize it or not. That's a bigger question. You can invent a lot, but it does not mean everything is suited for a commercial product. Great. I think my job at that time was really to also ask questions on the other side. They're saying, "Hey, Doc, what's missing here for you? And what if we change this? Would that be okay?" So all of the communication going back and forth is very, very key. What I love about our field, and that's my passion, is this ability to have so many cross-functional people talking about one product. I cannot develop a product by myself without a physician input. I cannot develop the product by myself without technology that I not necessarily know about, and somebody will teach me that technology. So, and that's the beauty of what we do. And having that trust with physicians, having that ability of physicians to spill their guts to us, quote unquote, saying, hey, look, I cannot do this without you, and have that handshake. I think that's phenomenal. Once you have that, I mean, physicians are busy. They have also some of them have egos. So let's just put probably that on the table. So I think, but have been humble enough to trust you, and then tell you really their problems and help you solve the problem together. I think that's phenomenal. And I'm not talking about just a voice of customer where you bring something to the table. You go the deep dive on what is missing, what they cannot do, and they wish they could do. And
Right.
that's a very personal question to a physician.
Right. No, absolutely. And because it's a personal question for a physician, a lot of times they're thinking about the last procedure where there was a gap, or as you mentioned before, a particular anatomy that they ran into. And so I can imagine part of what you're trying to do is to find what the theme is. Is there a theme that can be broadly applied? Because if you're going to go through the process of developing an innovation or a product, it obviously can't be for just a singular instance or a singular person or singular patient. You want it to be as broad as possible. So you're probably trying to think of or look at what's the theme that can be most broadly applied to benefit patients.
100%. Absolutely. And that speaks towards also some of the stuff that we do at T45. So there are observations, like one or two cases. Great. Is there actually a systemic problem that we need to look into, or this is more of a particular acute problem that a physician just had? And sometimes a physician just had speaks, especially in what we do is minimally invasive surgery. So we have also that usability. Also, we need to think about. It's like, well, maybe a great physician has been able to do it, but probably the average, quote unquote, the average physician, they will have hard time. So how does that impact as well? Great questions when we talk to physicians. Love it all the time when I have that opportunity with them, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's hard to put a definition on T45 because it touches on so many different aspects of the innovation cycle. But I'm gonna ask you, how would you define T45? You're in an elevator and you have to describe it to someone in an elevator.
Right. So we are innovators first, but I think we have T45 is defined by strategy to get a product to the hands or hands of a physician and into a patient. So I think that strategy that we're deploying is what defines T45. So what are we deploying? So first of all, we're 100% focused on cardiovascular. At least today, we're 100% focused on cardiovascular devices, and more specifically, minimally invasive surgeries. We want to carry things that are in the cardiothoracic world, for example, into minimally invasive or changes within what we have today or as devices. So that's one. The second thing is we will always deploy a strategy that we call best follower. So it's not like we cannot be the first one at innovating, and we can. I think our ecosystem now has evolved that it gives an advantage to the second and the third, probably not the fourth and the fifth. So we want to be able to park ourselves within that second or the third element. So you see, for example, therapy, which is a drug coated balloon with two drugs in there. We're probably um, maybe third in the race right now for what we're trying to achieve. Core, we went from being second to potentially first, but Core is a coronary sinus reducer, more specifically defined for an indication that is called coronary microvascular dysfunction. And our third company is an IVIS, intravascular imaging company. And that, of course, is a crowded market, but we're bringing something new to it. We're probably the first one to be able to bring a system that is all portable into the cath lab with wireless communication, and then a brand new sensor that brings new images to the table. Where OCT-like while being an IVIS. That's a breakthrough technology for us, and we would drive in it towards having more of a decision or supporting a decision play with physicians.
Yeah.
So cardiovascular, minimally invasive, fast follower. That's where we are today in our T45 lab.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you covered a lot of ground there. So cardiovascular, big market, obviously, big patient needs there. coming from the Cleveland Clinic, one of the strongest cardiovascular institutions in the world. So great background there. You're focused on minimally invasive, which, is very exciting to hear. One of the things we often hear connected to minimally invasive and ease of use of those procedures is the importance of imaging. And that also seems to be a theme within T45. Speak a little bit about that marriage between minimally invasive procedures and imaging.
Yeah, absolutely. So for our IVIS, we have the inability the inability of physicians to do procedures without an imaging now is becoming important for physicians to have that those platforms. Now, issues that we have in those images, or at least on the IVIS side, is the fact that um, you might have a good image, so good high quality image that you would display on a screen, but the workflow to get to that image is a little bit takes time. We hear from physicians, for example, it's like, well, as the system is being set up, I have to wait, and I don't like waiting. Give me something to do. I have a patient on the table. I just need to fold my hand. That's not really what I want to do. On the other hand, you have a system where it's more of a plug and play, so it's easy to set up, but the images are not great. So physicians have to make right now a decision between which of the two systems that they would want to use. They want to wait for it to be set up, but the reward could be a good image, or they can do imaging fairly quickly and have their answers if that's what they're seeking. For us, we're trying to remove that duality, if you will, from a physician's head by providing a system that is high quality images. So our images are OCT-like with IVIS. That's a huge undertaking and a breakthrough in our minds. And then, in addition to that, the setup of the system has to be very quick, much of like a plug and play. So we solved those two problems when we put it together. What we also resolved is all of these cables that come out of these consoles. So we leverage the improvement in computational power, the improvement in downsizing the electronics, and actually we put all of those intravascular console, IVIS consoles, in literally in one handheld unit that you can have in the sterile field and close to the physician. It's we've been at it for a while, a couple of years now, and we've got a great system. Our next move now with this system from the hardware that we've developed is really paying attention to the software. Now, again, with the revolution of AI and imaging, we cannot ignore that in our product. So that's for us our next step with Nuevo.
Right. No, that's very exciting. So we're talking about IVUS, so intravascular ultrasound. We're trying to replicate images as best as possible as you might have under direct visualization. You're going minimally invasive, so you're in a closed environment, so you have to be able to get these images to be able to perform the procedure. So quality is a must, but you hit on something really important there, which is workflow. If it takes hours to produce the images during a procedure, it's just not going to be something that can be commonly used. And sometimes innovators are so focused on the innovation and maybe producing an ultra quality image, but if the workflow isn't there, the adoption is just never going to happen. It sounds like you have a very strong focus on workflow in your companies and your technologies.
100%. Actually, we say we look at the product experience. We talk a lot about product experience at T45 rather than product performance. Product performance, of course, we need to have the performance of the product, but that's not all of it. It cannot be all of it because of the usability, the workflow. It is important to really put ourselves in the shoes of a physician who's operating, so the experience, and we need to make this, uh, you know, quick, easy, intuitive, right? So we cannot have the physician try to figure things out. It's interesting because as engineers, we don't have that. we're not taught about product experiences, right? So we're
Not
we're
about
taught
product
about
performance. Yeah.
exactly, that's correct. So just having a team around us here in any of these companies to really start thinking about product experience. Sometimes, especially the new people that we hire, and then we start having this conversation, they look at me, it's like, Marwan, what are you talking about? What is a product experience? Why are we talking about product experience? You have the best product performance that I can give you here. So that's very interesting.
But I also have to imagine in the context of a venture studio with a portfolio that you're having common experiences and shared learnings as you learn more and more about a product.
100%. That actually, we talk about T45 Lab as an ecosystem as well, because now we have multiple companies and we learn from each other, of course, within the boundaries of confidentiality from one and the other. I think having engineers of different background talking to each other about their problems, like, look, I'm trying to do this. How did you guys solve it? That's very enriching, at least in our environment here. Very, very. We like the ecosystem because we can see very quickly how there's this cross pollination, people helping each other out, and then bringing you new ideas to the table. Again, we're innovators. We're trying to brainstorm. So having somebody looking at a problem from a different perspective is always important to us.
And you're identifying some unmet needs and you're connecting that to the product experience. One of the unmet needs that you identified, which I thought was very insightful, was focusing on microvascular dysfunction. Could you just talk a little bit about what that is from a cardiac condition and why it's important and potentially how you might be developing a device to help address it?
Right. Fantastic question. So this is a nascent problem. It's called coronary microvascular dysfunction. So coronary microvascular dysfunction, the definition of it is the inability to dilate the capillaries inside the heart muscle. So now you could have, we're all familiar with an obstruction in big, large arteries, and those obstructions are being opened by a stent or a balloon or some type of device. But there's also another set of patients who have no obstruction in the big, large arteries, but they still have angina and ischemia, angina symptoms and ischemia within the heart. So literally small heart attacks as they go along. And that is due to the fact that as this patient walks or they're under exertion, this inability of these capillaries to dilate to bring in oxygen to the heart muscle is an impediment to their daily life. Today, it's managed by drugs. The problem is these patients are about 60% of these patients are refractory to drugs, and then you have to give them about 2 to 3 anti-anginal drugs at the same time, and then have to manage side effects. We are developing a therapy using a coronary sinus reducer. Now, the problem is in the arterial side, but the solution resides on the venous side in the coronary sinus. All what we're doing is reducing the flow or the blood coming out of the heart. Think about it as pinching a hose at the end, and it creates this back pressure, and it starts to dilate a little bit the capillaries. So, and it provides more oxygen to the heart. We are in clinical development, so or testing. It seems that we're on the right track. This is a very important uh, disease that we're trying to resolve because there are about 1 million patients that actually suffer from this condition with no therapy at this stage. So if we can cross the finish line, I think this we can bring a fantastic device to in the hands of the physicians and obviously the patients as well. So
Right. And so how are you uncovering these unmet needs? And you used a term earlier that I really like, which is best follower. Oftentimes we talk about fast follower and obviously speed to market matters, but it doesn't matter if you're second or third to market with a technology that is worse than or even potentially equivalent to what was already there. So you're focused on being a best follower, which I interpret to mean bringing something new differentiation that has true clinical meaningfulness to patients and physicians. So you want to be a best follower and you're attaching that to an unmet need. So how are you uncovering an unmet need? How do you know that it's truly unmet? And then how do you know that best follower is best enough or good enough?
Right. Lot of questions there, Omari. So
We'll take them
let's
one by
see.
one.
Let's unfurl. That's
Yep.
that's great. That's fantastic. But those are important questions. So let's just start with the first one. How do we put ourselves in the best? Where do we find these technologies that we can follow and be the best followers? Let's just answer that one first. So, observations, obviously. So we look at things that are not necessarily in the podium yet. We asked a lot of physicians. The thing is, turns out that Europe is a little bit ahead of us in experimenting with new technologies, just because of the regulatory barriers that at some points were lower than here in the US. So a lot of new ideas that have been tested, and that's where we go there, and we really have good conversations with physicians as well. So what do you see as a new and new devices? And then we start thinking, it's like, well, why is this device new? What is the problem? What are they trying to achieve as well? So just a curiosity first on something that is completely different first, right? Of course, does not mean we're going to follow something that is just different for the purpose of being different, but I think it just teases our curiosity. Then we start studying. So clinical journals, reading, talking to other physicians. So when we started actually with VahadiCore, we started to be best follower to a company here that also has a coronary sinus reducer. Although the first time they were looking at refractory angina, which is different than coronary microvascular dysfunction. It's after that when we started to study that we recognized that there's another unmet need that is adjacent to what this champion, we call them champions actually when although we're competing, we would love that somebody is pulling the field forward for us. So we call them champions. And then we studied and we said, well, wait a second, I think the same physiology, the same mechanism of action could be applied to potentially another unmet clinical need. Then we start diving again into another unmet clinical need, look at the market size and all of it. We do our homework before we jump into something. So when we were on one path, we figure out that potentially we pivoted. So we pivoted to another disease type, and it turned out that disease type, was a lot of people suffering. It's Yeah, and then we decided to look. That's going to be our definition at Fahari core as far as our raison d'être, as they say, and then we decided to go after it. That brings up actually another good topic. So once you decide to pivot in something like this, then you have to really commit to it in the sense that clinical education, changing minds. So, and that's what's happening with Fahari core. So we have to do also a lot of physicians education. FDA does, also helping us out in trying to understand clinical endpoints. So there's a lot of things and that commitment from a startup company is very important. Even though it costs a lot of money and time, we have to be able to also usher new therapy into a new disease state that nobody else have looked at before.
Right, right. And as an operator from a company standpoint, a lot of times the mindset is just as you suggested, which is commitment and how do I drive this all the way through execution. But T45 also has the ability to invest. You invest in these companies, you help build syndicates. So it's a very interesting model and approach. And the investing milestone mindset is often focused on milestone based investments. Do you ever find it difficult to separate those mindsets, the mindset of an operator focused on commitment and execution, and the mindset of an investor who maybe is focused on de risking and unlocking milestones?
Right, and we get that question all the time. It's like, is there a conflict of interest here or not? Um, we don't believe there's a conflict of interest because the first stipulation of from an investor is to invest into management, into the people first. I think that's technology, of course, is part of it, but management and execution is a big decision making as well. Part of the decision making on the part of the investment. We trust our teams. We know how to build our teams, and from that perspective, it's very key to us that we have the best uh, people at the top, and then the engineers. We Once we invest into a team, the product obviously uh, is defined. So in this best follower situation, and then we invest into that package. Now, our investment, as you mentioned, is milestone based in these companies. So of course we sponsor them, but they also need to deliver something to us back. They need to show that they're moving the ball forward. So the more they show that they're moving the ball forward, the more we invest. We put significant amount, double-digit amounts in these investments in these companies. It's sort of like you know, putting your money where your mouth is, as they say, and that's really where we're heading. So far, I think it has been a good model for us. So far, I think it has been very rewarding because we take our time before we jump into building a new company. Meaning, we do a lot of homework. We do a lot of, we talk to a lot of physicians. We study a lot before we say, yep, this is going to be a T45 lab company,
Right.
because we want to make sure that whoever comes in the Series B investment as a lead investor finds really the foundation is very, very strong, so then they can carry the ball forward. We don't invest continuously in these companies. We just sponsor them, quote unquote, sponsor them during the Series A. And then the Series B, we have to have a lead investor, and then we syndicate with the lead investor. But we want to make sure that whatever we have put forward initially has a very, very strong and interesting foundation before we move on.
Right. And I think that term foundation is so important. Many founders want to prioritize innovation first,
Right.
innovation, and then infrastructure later. But so what are some of the foundational elements that you think founders need to build early, even if it feels premature, particularly because the Series B is coming and there will be additional investors around the table?
Right. So for that, context matters. So I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. So of course, innovation is key at the beginning, is being able to have FTO's freedom to operate on a technology that you want to embark on is very important. Not having too much of a narrowing claim, so something that, having something that you can expand on from an IP portfolio perspective is 100% key. So there's a focus on that initially. On the infrastructure side of it, it's it's a contextual base. It's context because for example, for advanced nanotherapies, we are in the nanoparticle world. Well, we had to invest very quickly into our infrastructure because it's a critical part of what we're trying to do. And without HPLC machines and the pharmaceutical equipment product, then we cannot do our art. Outsourcing that to somebody else to do, then you're just teaching somebody else to do it for you, and then you still need to bring it back. So that's context. For Vahadi Core, it's maybe a little bit different. We were comfortable early on to outsource because it was nitinol based, wire based. So there are other people that can do this very or better than we can initially. So we outsource all of that, and now we're building the infrastructure so we can bring it back to us inside of Vahadi Core. Nuevo Sono is same thing. It's a lot of electronics. It's a lot of things that are very, very small and a lot of design in there. So we decided to bring in and build the infrastructure early on. So it's a context based. The good thing about T45 as well is very early in the Series A, we try to be more focused on a variable cost situations, like how can we have our companies with as much variable cost as possible, and then less of the fixed cost. As the companies are growing, Series B and potentially Series C, we will see that they will have a lot more fixed cost associated with those with their in their budget than variable cost. So there's the transition from variable to fixed, and that's what we're trying to balance within these companies. When is the right time to have more engagement on a fixed cost basis?
Right. Right. And it strikes me that you have so many different experiences that you're bringing and that you brought into T45. You're almost like a Swiss Army knife of medical technology innovation. And one of the blades that you have is this tremendous experience in technology transfer out of clinical environments. How does your experience in technology transfer help to sharpen your ability to assess these new technologies?
Right. Um, yeah, so technology transfer is very important. We don't want to invent everything ourselves. I think there are plenty of other institutions out there with great minds that we would love to work with and bring in here. In having conversations with technology transfer offices, and there are two things that we look at. So one, we look at that the technology has to be so superior in itself that the entry barriers, if you will, of that technology is pretty high. So that when we take that technology, that core competency, then nobody else, even if all the IP has expired, then we still have a lot in-house that we can that we know. So that's case in point again. So Advanced Nanotherapy is a license from the Cleveland Clinic around nanotechnology. Of course, we do have IP, but we also have a lot of trade secrets. So from that perspective, Bahari Core is more of our innovation. We're more IP focused than actually trade secret focus on that front. So that's so one core competency, and then two, what we have to watch out for is who's going to be with you. The person who's going to be, of course, it's not your technology, somebody else's. So having an understanding of time commitment from the licensee or licensor, sorry, to us is very, very important. So how are we going to be building the team around this person? And all what we do in technology, teams are very, very key. Without a team, you cannot move forward. A good team will carry the ball forward, and a bad team, even if you have the greatest technology, and it won't be able to move yourself forward. So that question around who do we have at the center and how are we going to build a team around that person is key to us too.
Yeah, and that actually triggers an additional question, which is, are you starting to think about intellectual property and trade secrets a little bit differently now with AI and LLMs? There have been some that have said with the advances in those spaces that IP can be more easily challenged. And so there are some that are starting to trend more towards trade secret over IP. Is that something you're giving consideration toward?
Excellent question. Actually, we ourselves we signed up for AI based IP development, which is very recent experience for us as well. Um, in full honesty, we have not made up our mind what are we going to keep, but it's very scary what an AI can do right now in writing a full application literally within 30 minutes plus suggest claims for you. So um, the experience was great in some aspects, but it was also scary in another aspect because now it's like, well, look, if an AI can do this, then how are we going to compete in this environment? How are we going to protect
Exactly.
ourselves?
Yeah, because then AI
Right.
can also then look at what's available in public domain and tell you how to arrive at
100%.
freedom to operate very quickly.
100%. So those are good questions there are new questions to us in our industry. I don't know how it will actually evolve. For us, or at least at T45, we do like trade secrets because we feel that's close to us and not teaching how other people will do it. At least it gives us an advantage for, over a certain period of time or make it harder on somebody. At least they need time and money to get to where we are. Of course, it's not an IP protection over a certain period of time. If somebody figures out what you just did, then there's a risk there. So we'll see. It's definitely something that we are aware of, something that we've been experimenting with, and maybe another podcast I can tell you exactly our strategy. But for today, we're just going to limit ourselves to a question mark.
Yeah, that one alone I think would make for a very, very interesting and valuable conversation. So you're engaging in this best follower, best fast follower strategy and approach. And sometimes in our world, speed is framed as the enemy of rigor. How do you best work with teams to reconcile urgency with discipline?
Right. One word there is accountability. So we have to build very early on a team that is comfortable that their peers are accountable to each other. Because as we move forward, I always say, look, how can, a Ferrari can build a great car and move fast, right? So of course they're only a handful. This is not a mass production, not handful, probably hundreds. So it is about one, making sure that you build, within the team, there's that accountability to each other, because as we move fast, we need to make sure that we understand one is helping each other, helping your teammates, and then two, that if there's something that doesn't look right very early, let's just speak up. I think that's really the big culture that we have here is not hiding is a big term, but not staying silent. I think that's a better way of saying it, and empowering our teams to be able to speak up and say, look, we see something not right here. How can we get together and then look at it? That empowerment and then accountability has been at the center of our culture. Not everybody actually, of course, we speak about it and people will tell you, like, yeah, accountability is good. But I think once you start putting them into a fast environment, they see themselves that they need to deliver on a timeline, and then um, they start, you know, having been less rigorous and less accountable to their peers. And we had to a couple of times realign ourselves with realign these people with our mindset. It's okay to speak up. It's okay to do mistakes. It's okay for us, but it's you know, as long as the team reaction to those mistakes is all everybody's hands on trying to solve it, or we're okay with that. What we don't want is say, hey, look, and I have to meet my timeline no matter what, and therefore, I'm cutting corners here. It will come back and bite us back in the hind.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. And I think that goes back to the infrastructure you lay the groundwork for very early on. And to that end, is there a lesson from your operating days that you now find yourself repeating to founders over and over again?
Oh man, many. So of which one? Uh, well, one the big one that I keep telling my engineers. So sometimes we fall in love with our technology, and you heard that before 100,000 times. But I think when we fall in love with our technology, we miss two things in there, that we have to provide a technology that we are at the end of the day, we're a business. So we still have to provide a technology at a cost effective price, and then it should match your average sales price or ASP. So don't only think about a technology only on the technology itself. You have to put it into the context on the business context side of it too. We have a rule here that no matter what we do, we have to have a gross profit margin when we do the COGS and the average sales price of 80% on our product. So how do we achieve that? So early on, we set the bar on what the production cost should be, and then what's our pricing should be. And I think that's or it is, and then we calculate that gross profit margin, because without that, then we don't have an aim towards what a good product should be when we start manufacturing it.
It's the one aspect of designing for manufacturing.
And that's very early. That's sort of our secret weapon in all what we have been doing here. And people that have come and did due diligence on our companies, they see that, and they're very enamored by that in some cases, because that allows us to compete down the road. We understand price erosion will be here at some point. So building that manufacturability early is very, very key. I understand it's not as sexy as people would have it in the pitch. I get that, of course, but I can assure you that has been one of our biggest success so far, is the ability to demonstrate that we can, no matter what price erosion is on a product, we can sustain that 80% plus profit margin.
Yeah, one of the great tragedies is designing a terrific technology that no one can manufacture at a reasonable cost. Yeah.
Right, right.
Well, as we move towards closing, one of the questions I always like to ask is just more generally, What advice would you give to innovators, founders, builders who are in the arena right now and they're trying to turn breakthrough ideas into high clinical impact products? What's a couple pieces of advice that you would give to them?
Right. The biggest thing is when you build that technology towards a commercial and commercialization mindset, you have to start thinking and building your narrative. Narrative is very important. Tell the story. So why is this technology going to unlock a huge unmet clinical need and then provide such good value? And for me, value is quality over cost. So it's very important to be able to articulate that narrative on day one. Because if you can't, you cannot, we are in the business of not only innovation, but also in business of bringing a product that will be used in a patient in the future. So you should be able to articulate today what is that vision and how you're going to be, the narrative around how you're going to build it up. That's very, very key. People forget that. And then what all the focus is, yeah, I have great technology. Because I have a great technology, therefore you should be investing, or therefore you should do something with it. But that's not true.
Right.
So you
Yeah.
have to articulate the story behind it.
Yeah. The story is so important and so powerful. We invest in people, we invest in product, but we also invest in story.
Right. Right. And that's the biggest advice that I can give. And even today, that people that are asking me to be part of their advisory board, I just listen to how they articulate their story. And if it's shaky, then nobody's interested.
True. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. Really, really appreciate you coming on
Thank you.
and speaking with me, Marwan. And thank you to all of you for joining us on Powering the Future Within. If this conversation inspired you, follow the show and share it with your MedTech community. I'm Omari Bouknight. Stay inspired and keep innovating.